Hey, welcome back, everybody. Time once again to meet our community, the Hispanic business community here in Orange County. Powered by the Orange County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, with the man who knows everybody. He's going to prove it today. He's got some powerful people in the room here. Ruben, welcome to the show back again here.
Hey, thanks, Paul, for what you do, and thanks for everybody listening, wherever you're listening from. But our community is your community. That's what we want to share with our guests here. And we're fortunate to have gubernatorial candidate Betty Yee on our podcast. She's a former state controller of the state of California and a former member of the Board of Equalization as well. Great seeing you again.
Good to see you, Ruben, always.
Yeah, and thanks for being on our podcast,
yes.
And we appreciate it. Hey, we'd like to start off our podcast with just asking people personally, tell us a little bit about yourself personally that people might not know.
Sure. No, thank you. I'm a daughter of immigrants, first and foremost, and my parents are both from southeastern China. And in so many ways, I'm just a typical Californian with respect to having grown up in an immigrant family, went to public schools, probably like many families who have immigrant backgrounds, shared a bedroom with my siblings, but just really started out here in California at a young age, understanding that to really get far ahead in life, you have to fight. You have to fight and be an advocate, and you become an instant advocate when you're a daughter of immigrants who don't speak English. I did go to the public schools in San Francisco and was able to really hone in on my financial experience, having done the books for my parents' laundry and dry cleaning business. I have a very soft spot in my heart for small businesses and also for just this great state of California that had given me and my family just such great opportunities. So I look at my life today, having been a lifelong activist and advocate, but also someone who has deep fiscal and financial experience, and that has served me well. And I do think that this is something that I hope can be a factor in terms of how we uplift all Californians today.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. Before you were part of the Board of Equalization, where did you get your start in politics?
I got my start in politics when I was 13 years old.
Oh, my God. Okay.
And I'm glad I'm sitting down telling you this story because I was an advocate for my parents, and actually for the 4 Chinese American families in my neighborhood. There was a busing program that was going to start with the San Francisco Unified School District. My little sister was going to be part of that first class to be bused across the city as part of the school desegregation program. And we weren't opposed to the goals of the busing program. We wanted students, obviously, across the city to have equal opportunity. But my parents and the 4 other families, they all were small business owners. And they were worried that with the elementary school just 2 blocks walking distance from our home, and from the business, that if an emergency should happen with my little sister, that they would have to shut down their business for the day. None of them drove, and they'd have to take public transportation for well over 2 hours to pick up their child. And it was a hardship, financial hardship.
Sure.
So I made the statement before the local school board town hall at the elementary school, and basically made the statement that we're not opposed to the goals of the program, but this is going to create some hardship if we have to shut down the business for a day should an emergency arise with our child. I was 13 years old when I made that statement, and went back to my seat in the auditorium, and the busing program lasted the better part of the next 30 years. And everything was fine. Nothing happened to my siblings. But just to be able to have a voice for those who couldn't express themselves before a public body was my first foray into politics.
Wow. Okay. And where did you go from there? What was your kind of next step?
I became very active in just student government throughout school. That experience continues to be etched in my mind to today about how politics, in my mind, is still something for good. It's a vehicle for how we can just bring the most diverse voices together for change. And as I think about politics today, yes, it's all the ugly things that we read about and hear about in the news, but at its fundamental core, it is a vehicle for how we can make change for good, in my mind.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you've won, obviously, statewide,
yes,
being the state controller. And I think there's a lot of candidates in the race, but
yes,
I think you're one of the, maybe the only or one of the few that have won a statewide office.
There are a few of us,
Okay.
but I ran for controller in 2014 and was reelected in 2018. And I do have some bragging rights where in 2018, I earned the highest number of votes of anyone on a ballot in the nation. It was not a presidential election year, but we earned over 8 million votes. But I think having statewide executive experience is really important. Yeah.
It is. Executive experience, I think, is important running for governor. Right?
Yes.
I think you need to have that. And the fact that you have it, I think, is fantastic. What are some of the priorities that you foresee if you become governor?
The priorities for California, look, everyone's talking about affordability, but for me, it's about something much more lasting and sustaining. We can fix affordability with respect to how we look at building housing more quickly that's affordable. We can look at affordability in terms of how we can contain healthcare costs. But for me, it's something much more lasting, and that is how do we build and invest in economically and environmentally sustainable communities. California's been a leader and an innovator on so many fronts. How do we bring all of that knowledge and experience together to where we are actually looking at every part of the state, looking at what the attributes are in each part of the state and leaning in on those attributes, but at the same time, how do we make investments in those regions where we just see just business development, the ability to create opportunities for economic mobility in each of our regions, and perhaps even how we rethink how we provide healthcare, because we know that there are some healthcare deserts in California, to be able to really increase the access points to healthcare that can also help drive down costs.
Good. Tell us a little bit about yourself when you were your controller. Tell people, what does a controller do, and how does being a controller going to help you be governor?
Absolutely. The controller is essentially the CFO for the state. Okay. And as the chief fiscal and financial officer for the state, I was responsible for being sure that the state's fiscal condition was intact, that we were looking at managing our cash well, that we were looking at producing the financial reports that give investors of the state confidence about being able to see a return on their investment given our financial and fiscal condition. I also was responsible for payroll for close to 300,000 state employees and California State University employees. We are the independent auditor for the state, so auditing state programs and also local governments. And look, government is a huge operation. We were able to uncover about $7.5 billion in misused spending, unallowed spending, and that just comes with how big the operation is, and nobody to point a finger at, except that unless it was fraudulent or just really abuse. So just really being a really good watchdog for our public finances. And then also as a state controller here in California, probably unlike in other states, the controller had broad policy responsibilities as well. I had a seat on dozens of boards and commissions, including the nation's two largest public pension funds, the California Public Employees Retirement System and the California State Teachers Retirement System. And back at that time when I served, our combined portfolio was about $800 billion. So really understanding that how we invested the pension funds to get a good return to be able to pay the retirement benefits for our public sector workers and educators was an awesome responsibility that I took very seriously. And then served on a number of boards, including the State Lands Commission, where we were stewards of the state's lands as it related to our tide lands by the coast, but also desert lands and other public lands to balance certainly economic development and also environmental stewardship with respect to those lands. And also the tax boards. So I chair the Franchise Tax Board and also continue to be a member of the Board of Equalization as a voting member as controller.
Interesting. And then you talk about pensions. Do we have a unfunded liability that we need to be concerned about as a state?
We do. Look, we have public pension plans that both are underfunded with respect to the state teachers retirement system. We are on a path and continue to be on a path, albeit very difficult, to become a fully funded system by 2046. And this was pursuant to legislation that the legislature had enacted, really wanting to see an effort to get the pension system to be sure that it would be intact and there for our retired educators. So this is a long-term, decades-long effort to get to full funding by 2046. With respect to CalPERS, our Public Employees Retirement System, that is much of the unfunded liability is with respect to retiree health care. So we, at the state level, had, under the former Governor Jerry Brown, had enacted a policy during collective bargaining to have our state employees actually pre-fund their retirement health care so that it wasn't pay-as-you-go where we'd be sitting on a huge liability there. That has been subject to negotiations as we've had budget challenges under this current governor, and right now we're not making enough ground there in terms of reducing that liability.
Okay. But where you think we're on track or we're off track?
I think we can do more. But a lot of it is also with both pension funds, we're global institutional investors. And so a lot of what's going to affect our return on investments in our portfolio is going to be really influenced by a lot of geopolitical risk and just a lot of volatility with respect to the global economy right now. I went to every investment committee meeting, and I can say that I think both funds did a very good job of just being, I won't say conservative, but being very mindful of just some of the risks with that volatility.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned small business, and we have a heart for small business as well.
Yes.
We're a small business development center.
Yes.
Under the SBA, we get funding from the state and the governor's office and other great organizations that help us provide those services for no cost.
Yes.
So what are your kind of plans for small business? What do you foresee when you become governor?
First, I want to be sure that we are laying out a vision for where there are small business opportunities. I think, look, I part of why I have a soft spot in my heart for small business is because for my family, for sure, and for so many others, it's a vehicle for making dreams come true, right?
Sure.
Neither of my parents had a high school education, and to be able to come here as immigrants and to have a small business, they owned a laundry and dry cleaning business for 30 years and were able to put 6 kids through college after much sacrifice and hard work. But I dare say that is just nearly impossible today.
Yeah.
But I do look at small business as a really important entree, particularly for our immigrant communities and for those who really don't necessarily have the background and want to be a part of the economy. But so I think as a state, we need to take on a bigger role as far as identifying where are those small business opportunities with respect to industries that are in demand. And I would say here in Orange County and throughout California, healthcare is going to be just a tremendous sector for entrepreneurial and small business opportunities. We have an aging population in California, so the needs attendant to that. We have also, just with the growing emergence of AI and innovative technologies, so much of our manufacturing is going to be advanced manufacturing, so that's going to be also an opportunity. How do we supply manufacturers and that type of thing? And then education is going to continue to be something that drives just the need for just, I hope, more flexible ways of how people can get into these areas of work, whether it be through traditional employment or running a small business.
Yeah, we're obviously on a campus here, so
Yes.
we're intentful on why we're on a campus, and education is very important to
It
us
is.
and to our community. Let's expand a little bit about
Yes.
education. What do you foresee doing as governor?
I think one of the things with education is how do we continue to make it relevant, right, to the needs of our economy. I look at the role of education really through a couple of lenses. One is, I think, first and foremost, how do we really create generations of what I hope will be lifelong learners, people who are interested in not just being a part of an economy, but that helps just people just continue to be discerning about what's happening in the world around us and being available and accessible for people who have a ongoing curiosity about that throughout their lives. But as it relates to preparedness for economic opportunities, we do have to make education much more relevant. The demands are coming at us so quickly. I think the ways that we are preparing our learners for these opportunities sometimes have been just the same way that we've done it, just traditional, whether it's 4-year degrees or going to a community college, transferring to a four-year institution. I love what's happening here in Orange County with just Orange Technical College and the flexibility of how we are moving our learners into high demand areas of the economy. We need to think more about how we do that and how we have K-12 education be much more immersed in that. I'm a big fan of dual enrollment, where we just expose our young people to those opportunities at a much earlier age to where they can then see a pathway for how to attain those jobs that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, we're very blessed to have the universities we have here
Yes.
in Orange County, and you talked about healthcare as well. We
Yeah.
just opened our first all-electric hospital at
Yes.
UCI.
That's very exciting.
And City of Hope just opened as well. A facility here at Hogue is expanding, and so healthcare is obviously very important. Education is very important.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're a beautiful state, obviously, but homelessness has increased, unfortunately, just significantly, right? Even the spending, I think it's around $24 billion
Yes.
since 2019.
Exactly.
And we haven't really seen much impact. At the end of the day, how are we going to have impact, and how are we going to really dig into this issue?
Sure. It is a complex issue, and I would say the first step really for any level of government to tackle it is to understand who is unhoused. At the same time, and equally important, how do we prevent people from becoming unhoused? And as we look at the population of those who are not living in homes today, it is a very diverse population. Students, it's working families, it's people who are actually employed. And so how do we quickly look at getting this particular segment of the unhoused population into intermittent supportive housing as quickly as possible, and then moving them into permanent supportive housing, and then hopefully a stable rental situation. And I will also say into home ownership down the road. And then for others that have, and there is still a segment of the unhoused population with chronic mental health and substance use issues, that's going to require some more intensive focus, but it is intensive focus. And how do we make sure that we have the capacity to the needs of of this population. And then there are those who have just some very deep-seated issues around mental health and substance use that may require more institutional care. And so I think it is a continuum. And one of the things that I think we have not done well is that we have not really just done what I would consider like a triage of sorts to just understand who is unhoused. Because if we can understand that, I think we can also do more to prevent more people from becoming unhoused. I dare say that if we're able to help just pay a family's rent for a month because they're just underwater for a while, that we save more than actually having them become part of the unhoused population, where now we're talking about more than just paying the rent.
Yeah, and that was like our guest we had on last week, who was SPIN, or Special Purpose Helping People in Need. And,
Yes.
And we have like calculated about 400 families here just in Orange County where we can help them out of those financial situations
Exactly.
you're talking about
Right.
before they become
Absolutely.
unhoused.
Right,
And so
right.
there's different segments or different ways of segmenting the homeless issue, whether it's veterans, whether it's kids who age out of different services as well, and those who have drug use or those who have mental
Yes.
health issues. There's ways of doing it.
It's not a
but-
one-size-fits-all.
but
You
it's-
really do
but
have
it's
to
going
be
to be very comprehensive
right.
on it. So
Yes.
we appreciate that. How do you describe your leadership style?
My leadership style is inclusive but tough. Not afraid to make tough decisions, but I make tough decisions with information. And I also like having teams around me who just bring just different experiences and attributes. We live in a diverse state. And one of the things that I don't think we've done well as a matter of governing in California is how do we bring those diverse perspectives into our decision-making process? And yes, I intend to have a good relationship with the legislature, represent all parts of California.
Right.
But it's even beyond that. I've been marveling at how people are looking at this time today about how we all have to step up and meet the moment. And I think about what that means. And obviously it's about how you just rise to the occasion and rise to the challenge. But how do you do that? What's going to motivate you to make the right decisions and make sure that you are on the path to really delivering good outcomes for people? And I have had this mantra, Ruben, ever since I've been in public service, and that is if I have one foot squarely in the office and the job in which I'm just responsible for, and the other foot in the community, and they're moving in tandem, I'm probably doing a good job and delivering results. We cannot ignore just what people are feeling as we're talking today, right now.
Right.
There are, hundreds, if not thousands of families sitting around a kitchen table making tough choices about what bills are going to pay so that they can provide a good holiday experience for their kids. And these are the experiences that we need to embed in the policies that we enact in California to really deliver better outcomes.
That's right. Wildfires have obviously been
Yes.
a big issue for us, not just recently, but basically the whole existence of California.
Right.
But last January 7th was huge, the Altadena fire,
Yes.
the fire in the Palisades, the insurance issues that go along with it. What are your kind of takeaways with that, and what do you think you can do as governor to help with wildfires and then obviously the insurance issue as
Yeah,
well?
let me take the second part first on insurance. Very concerned about insurance, obviously. When people put so much importance and emphasis, and rightfully probably the most important asset that they own, that they have in their homes, we have to really make sure we're doing everything to help them protect that. And so on the insurance front, I will say that every state, so insurance is not regulated at the national level, it's regulated state by state.
Right.
And as we think about California, as we think about Florida, as we think about just some of the other states that are prone to disasters, I do think we need to have a role for the federal government. And right now, my thinking is how do we have the federal government actually help continue to stand up the FAIR plans in every state before they go under, frankly. So can we have a national reinsurance program that can help do that? But in California, I would say this. I look at wildfires as part of the climate crisis, but I also look at it as part of a risk management responsibility of the state. And if we're not taking care of the climate crisis in everything that we're doing, all the way from disaster preparedness and response to public health, we are going to see every aspect of our budget eaten up just by trying to respond to the crisis.
Right.
So we have to be smarter about how we look at putting our dollars in place. With respect to insurance, what I hope the next insurance commissioner will do is really engage the insurance companies to say, and along with a roundtable of first responders, with our emergency personnel, with just our building standards people, homeowner voices, but this is where insurance companies, if we are doing everything right, we're doing everything right. What can you do in terms of how you can just change your underwriting to where you're using AI, you're using the new technologies so that you are not just arbitrarily canceling policies. You can be in one neighborhood and one house is insured and the other isn't. They've all both done the same thing in terms of home hardening and just defensive perimeters. So I think homeowners are very motivated to do everything they can to protect their properties, but what are the insurance companies willing to do? And we'll buy you some time. We will shore up our fair plan in the meantime, and we know that you're contributing to that, but that's not a long-term solution.
That's right. You talked about affordability a little bit earlier. Let's touch on a big one for us in California. It's energy.
Yes.
Energy costs.
Yes.
I think are the highest in the whole union, right? As far as
they are,
everything.
yes.
So
yeah.
what are your kind of plans when it comes to energy?
We have to, in my mind, get back on the path of accelerating renewable energy. My hope when we actually became very committed to renewable energy, solar, wind, and the like, was that we would have a path that we could demonstrate to Californians in terms of here's what's going to happen in terms of how energy costs will rise in the near term as we continue to prepare our grid to take on new energy sources. But over time, we expect that those sources will bring more affordable energy, and this is what we can expect. And instead, what we have seen is essentially a Public Utilities Commission that has continued to approve rate increases for our investor-owned utilities, but not really continuing to help with accelerating renewable energy. They are doing everything they can to shore up the grid. But frankly, a lot of the rate increases we've seen have been helping to have the utilities respond to the wildfire risks as well. And so you just see these layer of add-ons in terms of these rates that ratepayers are footing the bill for. I would put more teeth into the Public Utilities Commission in terms of the Office of Ratepayer Advocate really having more of a role in terms of looking at how they analyze the rate increase proposals that are coming before the commission. I definitely would have a commission with no ties to the industry, no financial interest, no just relationship with who they're regulating, but then also putting more teeth into the audits of the commission as well. What have we gotten since the last rate increase? Have we seen improvements? We are looking at a huge, for example, undergrounding of wires by PG&E. Is that the best technology still, given how expensive it is, and on top of all the other costs that are being layered over for ratepayers to foot?
Yeah, that's a good point, because we've been thinking about that for a while, but now is it relevant technology-wise? Right. Things have changed. Let's talk about some other infrastructure, right? We do need more water. We need more other things there that would help with wildfires and other things. What are your kind of plans on when it comes to infrastructure?
You know, I'll talk about water for an issue because the history of California is so tied to the history of water here.
Yeah. We make movies about it.
Yeah, Chinatown, and of course, Desert Cadillac, the Bible about California water.
That's right.
Look, we've been a desert state for a long time. We've known that. And yet, what I think in terms of how do you increase water supply, right? So I know we have a proposal before the legislature with respect to diverting water from the Delta up north to California. I am against that project. Where I am seeing a lot of innovation in terms of increasing water supply and certainly maintaining the health of our current supply is regionally and locally. Our water agencies know what they have to do. They know the sources of where they can get their water. I do think we are going to have to look at water desalination at a greater level in the future, but that technology is starting to get more perfected as well in terms of how we can lessen the harm on ocean health. So I think really how do we look at regional and local efforts related to water? And look, I'm going to be the one to tell Californians, we have to be better about how we conserve water. This is not an infinite resource. And so as we develop new water supplies, how are we going to be able to be sure that our ag sector, our urban users, our industries are going to be able to get the water that they need? But we have to be smart about it. We have to measure it. I always have a saying that we can't manage what we don't measure. Right now, the big news of the day is our AI companies are trying to develop data centers that are big energy and water users, but we're not asking them to disclose. We know what they need. I think that's irresponsible. We need to start with good data about what our needs are and be able to hopefully incentivize and support local and regional development of new water supplies.
Yeah, no, we definitely agree on that. Housing. Obviously, housing in California is difficult, whether it's you're just renter or you're trying to buy a home, or what are your thoughts on CEQA? What are your thoughts on building? What are your thoughts on, I know Governor Newsom, when he came in, he was talking about we need 3 million more houses. I think we got to 700,000 so far. Right. It's a challenging thing. What are your thoughts on
It's challenging. Look, most housing and housing development approvals are within the jurisdiction of our local governments, most of our cities. And the state really we've actually provided a lot of funding for housing, but we don't really have a housing plan for California. as much as we want to look at building more housing, there's no just strategic and comprehensive housing plan for California. When I look at housing, I like to just back up a little bit and talk about housing from the perspective of how do we build economically sustainable communities. I think when we can talk about it that way, we get a little bit more local buy-in about just what it is that we're building. Look, if we're building housing to meet the demand and people are still commuting 2 hours to a job, I mean,
Right.
what is that? Is that really better for our environment? Is it really better for our economy? It's wear and tear on a lot of families. So I like to look at, with the levels of government that are responsible for housing, what can the state do? What can we do in terms of incentivizing business development where we want to see housing so that we have economic opportunities right where near the housing is being built, so we can have our institutions like our schools and others just really lean in on how we prepare the workforce for those industries. So housing to me is something that is looked at in a very limited way. And so obviously we want to see more housing built. I think for local governments, there's not a financial incentive to build housing because it doesn't pay for itself most of the time, particularly with Prop 13 that capped the property tax rate. I'm not suggesting we increase property taxes, but what I am suggesting is maybe what we need to do is to bring back redevelopment to where we can have cities have a little bit more of the share of the property tax growth in their regions so that they can have some incentive to build more housing. And with redevelopment, you can I look at housing in two fundamental ways. It's about land and it's about finance. Land in terms of where you can build, how you can build, what you build. Finance, how are you going to use the financial tools that you have to build housing that people can afford, and also how do you build the supply that you need.
Right.
And so redevelopment, if you're looking at blighted areas, you can go and actually do a lot more in terms of how you can bring more housing stock into being. One is looking at housing preservation, just looking at how you modernize and just preserve existing housing. Secondly, looking at reuse and adaptive reuse, strip malls and the abandoned sites that can actually be put to work with respect to housing. And then what we've been seeing pop up around the state that shows promise are community land trusts, where with the housing that's being built, if there is a land trust, the underlying value of the land is not going to be the prohibitive factor in terms of the cost of the housing, so you can actually build more affordable housing. And then I would also look at housing from a home ownership perspective, and that is how do we look at alternative models of home ownership, and whether it's cooperatives or whether it's looking at co-ownership not between related family members. So I think there are a lot of opportunities to look at these things differently and how to see how we can drive down those costs. As far as CEQA exemptions, look, the jury's out whether that's going to expedite the speed at which we bring on housing. My sense is not. There are so many other factors, such as the cost of materials and supplies, right?
Yeah,
And we're in this environment now where all these factors are coming to play in terms of just how quickly we can bring more housing on board.
Yeah, an important issue for all of us. So when you look at all these issues as coming in and wanting to be governor of I think the greatest state in the union.
It is the greatest state.
Why do you think people should vote for you? What is your pitch to the California voter? Why Betty Yee? Why now? Why is the time now for you to be governor of California?
Ruben, I am in total agreement about California being the greatest state. And it really is my personal desire to continue to have that be the case in terms of how, as a global economy here in California, that everyone should have just opportunities for economic mobility in more robust ways. And yet what we're seeing is just so many families who are struggling, right? And why I want to be governor? The struggles of everyday Californians today, I've lived through as a daughter of immigrants, and I'm going to keep saying that as a proud daughter of immigrants. This was my experience growing up. We had to struggle. Look, I did the books for my family. I knew the weeks that we couldn't have that extra carton of milk on the table. And I would say to all of those who have continued to just be here in California, particularly our working families, thank you for not giving up on California. We see you, we hear you, I see you and I hear you. But at the same time, my fiscal and financial experience, I think, can really come to play because we're going to have some very bad budget years coming up. And how are we going to solve the budget issues without hurting our families or setting our families back even further? And I do think we're going to have to raise revenue. And I know there are already proposals out there to tax corporations and the wealthy more, which I would support in the right context because these are the very same entities that the federal government is essentially rolling out the red carpet for. So I do think they need to continue to pay their fair share. But this is where the fiscal and financial discipline really matters. The executive experience really matters. The ability to make tough decisions really matters. And so I'm going to be looking at, yes, making budget cuts, but also looking at raising revenue. But we also can do this at the same time, invest in our people. We are the fifth largest economy in the world. We need to invest in our people because that's the fifth largest economy in the world. We can do business with any part of the world. We are that diverse and we are that good. And to not create those opportunities, look, I termed out as controller in January of 2023. I still get calls from companies in the EU and Canada that want to do business with California. Put the tariff issue aside, that's challenging right now, but people come here to see how they can really grow and prosper together with California.
I agree. They want to invest here. They want to be here.
Exactly.
I want to be here too as well.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
We've run out of time already. I can't believe it, but we want to thank you for your leadership, your past leadership, your current
Thank you,
leadership.
Ruben.
The fact that you're running for governor is a big deal. I think it's a measure of somebody who wants to continue to make California great, and we appreciate your time today. So thank you for being here, Betty.
Thank you, Ruben. I enjoyed the conversation, and
Yeah.
just all best wishes to you and your continued success here.
Yeah, what's your website? Can
Oh,
you share your website with
yes,
our audience,
it's
please?
just bettye.com.
BettyYee.com. Sounds good. Everybody, if we don't talk to you, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you for being on.
Thank you, Ruben. Same to you.
All right, take care.
There you have it. One more reason to tune in each and every time to meet our community, the Hispanic business community here in Orange County. Powered by the Orange County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studios here at the University of California Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.